All right, Betsy, hello. And hello, everybody else in the class across the world, everywhere. Should I do a song? It's our final day. No, I'm not going to. Stop asking me to do it. I'm not going to sing a song today, but I might. I'm always open to peer pressure and the like. All right, so today is it's true. It really is true. Today is Hurricane Katrina. It is the last class of our Catholicism and disasters. I've been so happy that, as I've said, despite the class attendance often, this is probably the norm. I think the max we've had online and in person this year maybe is 12 or 13, which the room accommodates very, very nice. If people have not been up here in the St. Ambrose room, it's a very nice space the Vandal Catholic has. It's cozy, and so like probably more than that would probably be too much. But today we have 5 people total. Betsy online, 4 in class. Although we've had so many people filing through the class itself, the class has been doing really good online, which is awesome. This class is going to be posted in that normal space. I'm not even being sarcastic. I was telling you before the break. I think 3 of our maple syrup history streams have over 1,000 views on the channel. One has 1,100, which is awesome. Because I think that like we're in the middle of nowhere, Idaho / Eastern Washington, Palouse. This is not New York City. The fact that, well, great, like lectures about Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chernobyl are interesting to a larger Catholic audience is super, super cool. So this will always be in the same place. If you have missed anything or do miss anything, just, you can always email me for that info. What else in terms of housekeeping stuff? Last Catholicism and disasters, Wednesday recap, Wednesday look ahead to the spring. Betsy Johnson wrote in the chat, hi, so I'm responding now. Hi, Betsy Johnson. Hello to you. Father Chase is back pretty soon. I think next week there's a final Spirit in Life that him and I do. And besides that, it's like, you know what, guys? Be ready to fail finals. I don't know. Like, Merry Christmas. All I want for Christmas is 3 Ds on my final. D's get degrees. I hate the joke when people are like, they need to like refurbish this joke. What do you call the guy that graduates last in his class in medical school? And like, doctor, They need to make it like, they need to refurbish it. Like, what do you call the guy that graduates last in his class in medical school? And someone's like, oh, doctor. No, idiot. Like he probably shouldn't have been there. You probably call him moron, or made fun of him. Why did he graduate? By the way, tell me where he practices so I never, ever can go there. Ever. Let me avoid that practice. A half a star review. All right, serious stuff. Hurricane Katrina, Catholicism disasters, normal thing. We're going to talk about disaster first, Catholic reactions later. Hurricane Katrina was a Category 5 Atlantic hurricane when? Who remembers? I remember Hurricane Katrina very well. 2005. Yeah, exactly. Late August, early September. This is my freshman year of college. Was I attending school anywhere near New Orleans? No. I was in Newark area, South Orange, New Jersey, Seton Hall University, 10 minutes from New York City. So nowhere near the kind of, epicenter of this, not even the remnants when the storm breaks up and dumps all this rainfall over the Appalachian Mountains and things like that. But I remember very well, wow, even being an 18-year-old freshman, understanding then, despite my heavy ignorance, this is a big deal. I remember when this happened. Category 5, a hurricane. Let's say our kind of overall, prayer intention almost, may God rest their souls. Truly, all sympathy to people who suffered through this, the family, all the property damage, and especially the poor souls. They're in purgatory, need our prayers, etc. May God rest their souls. 1,836 fatalities. Damage estimated at the time over $100 billion, but closer to $150 billion. And especially, as I mentioned earlier, everyone knows this, in the kind of direct environs, the city limits of New Orleans, Louisiana. At the time, it was the costliest tropical cyclone on record, later tied, according to some estimates. A lot of this stuff is estimations, but Hurricane Harvey, the Texas one of 2017. The largest loss of life in Hurricane Katrina was due to flooding caused by engineering flaws in the flood protection system, particularly the levees around the city of New Orleans, the infamous, awful, flooding of the Ninth Ward. 80% of the city, as well as large areas in neighboring parishes, were flooded for weeks. This actually is a shout out to how Catholic Louisiana is. A parish in Louisiana is not a church parish. That is the name of counties, but counties are called parishes because of the deep Catholic, Francophone, French, Spanish history of the area. So the flooded parishes, they're not Catholic parishes as we call them. They come from a Catholic root, Louisiana name for counties. Flooded for weeks afterwards. The flooding destroyed most of New Orleans' transportation and communication facilities, leaving tens of thousands of people who did not evacuate the city prior to landfall with little access to food, shelter, other type of basic things, right? The disaster prompted a massive response effort, and we're going to talk about that in some ways in the latter half of the class. Federal, local, private rescue operations. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, which had designed and built the region's levees decades earlier, ultimately were held responsible for the failure of the flood control systems. However, federal courts later ruled the Corps could not be held financially liable due to sovereign immunity in the Flood Control Act of 1928. I don't know what to say about this because on the one hand, it's like, if my house was supposed to be protected by better engineering, or think about a bridge collapse that people let go too long without checking the tensile strength and all that. I understand families wanting compensation, being angry. At the same time, this is a once in a lifetime generation, 100-year biblical deluge. I mean, is it really the fault of the engineers, or is it just kind of Mother Nature? I don't know. What, you had your hand up. What do you think?
How many decades before it had been engineered by the Army Corps?
No, I have no idea. It says set decades earlier. That's all I have. So I don't know. Yeah, that could be 20 years, 40 years, 60 years. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, because I'm wondering what kind of maintenance was done on it.
Certainly. And a lot of it. So recently, exactly. Barb made a great point about just upkeep and maintenance. This is a story that everyone knows. What I'm going to say next is going to be a duh kind of point, but I recently took my car to the auto shop and the guy had to do something with it. And like, if you're saying like something with it, I don't even know what a steering wheel is in a car. Forget like V8 engine. Like, I know nothing about being a mechanic. If some guy was like, by the way, you have to like bite your tire to make sure, I'd be like, okay. So I don't know what was something with a transmission. Now, what is a transmission? I have no idea. But it was very loud. It was very loud beforehand. And these guys did the upkeep on it. And these guys are awesome. It's Jiffy, by the way, total shout out. Like, does Jiffy Lube and Pullman sponsor the show? Not yet. But maybe one day they will. And then I'll do that little barometer. Like, so make sure, every 3,000 miles, Jiffy Lube and Pullman, which is not part of the show at all. Maybe some people from there watch it, but it's not a part of the show officially. I do want to give an official shout out. I know it sounds like one of our sponsors. They're awesome. Every time I live in Pullman, I think as you all know, every time I go to Jiffy Lube, the guys are great. And so recently, right, the whole point of this long kind of ridiculous story is they do a great job. They fix the transmission. It sounds awesome. It was not that expensive. It was a good upkeep. If it would have gone on longer, perhaps greater problems ensue, obviously. So with the levies, exactly, what is being ignored in the reports, in the quality control of, hey, this needs to be fixed. There needs to be repairs done here. When was the timestamp? Well, it says here 1972 was up for repairs. And it's, right? Maybe it's way out of date. Exactly. Who knows? On January 4th, 2023, very recently, this year, this episode is being recorded November 27th of 2023. So this year, January 4th, the National Hurricane Center updated the Katrina fatality data based on a report by Rappaport from 2014, which reduced the estimate by almost 500 people. The original estimate I read, 1,836. This one reduces the number from 1,833 to 1,392. A lot of these questions are like, we talk about in the COVID era, did someone die because of COVID or with COVID? Was someone killed because of the hurricane, or actually there's these people in nursing home who are all 97 years old?
Am I hearing meowing?
I don't know, like, right? There's just kind of like ambiguities, etc. But that
There
same
you
report actually
are.
upped the
I
damage
see
estimate.
you now.
Remember I opened the class saying that the damage estimate was like around $100 billion? a large swath from about 97 to 145 billion dollars. This final report says Katrina, officially, according to us, is the costliest storm ever. $190 billion of damage. Man, it's good coffee. I'm thirsty too, so I'm kind of chugging the coffee. All right. Let's talk about some more basic facts. It originated from the merger of a tropical wave and mid-level remnants of Tropical Depression 10 on August 19th, 2005, near the Lesser Antilles. On the 23rd, 4 days later, the disturbance organized into Tropical Depression 12 over the southeastern Bahamas. Storm strengthened into Tropical Storm Katrina on the morning of August 24th. Moved towards Florida, it became a hurricane only 2 hours before making landfall between Hallandale Beach and Aventura on the morning of August 25th. The storm weakened over land, but regained hurricane status about 1 hour after entering the Gulf of Mexico. And it continued to get stronger as it moved across these open waters, unimpeded by anything. On August 27th, the storm reached Category 3 intensity on the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale, becoming the third major hurricane of that season of 2005. This is now August 27th. It's now 8 days, this kind of procedural building. Remember, starting out of the remnants of Tropical Depression 10 on August 19th, near the Lesser Antilles, by August 27th, the storm has reached Category 3 intensity. The next day, August 28th, 2005, it reaches its peak strength. Category 5 hurricane strength, with maximum sustained winds of 175 miles per hour and a minimum central pressure of 902 mbar. What does that mean? I'm going to confess. Anyone know what that means? Barometer. Yeah. What is 902 m barometer? What is that? I have no idea either. I mean, if people are listening to this and they're like, "Hey, you should probably know this because you're doing the class," I probably should, but I don't know what that means.
It's a pressure.
So extraordinary pressure. Extraordinary pressure. I need to find that out. Maybe put it in the description when I post the video later. 26.6 in HG. What is HG? What does that mean? Mercury reading. Okay. So 26.6 mercury reading, 902 on the barometer scale. I'm actually interested now to find out what this is myself. I understand millibar. Okay, Betsy Johnson. Betsy, you're literally a superhero. Here to save the day. Betsy, the chat superhero. Can you please explain? Can you write it out and I'll read it? Tell me what that means. What is 902 millibar pressure? What does that mean? Because I understand, everybody understands 175 miles per hour sustained winds. Still compare and think about, like we talked about the tri-state tornado outbreak. There, F5 tornadoes reach about 300 miles an hour. This is still 125 miles an hour less than that. But it is still 175 miles per hour, still 100 miles an hour over the threshold, just 75 miles an hour, needed to move to the F1 status, I believe, with a tornado. Plus all the kind of attentive problems of being on water, right? And then the deluge flooding that comes in the wake of hurricanes. Hurricanes, one of my boys, my sons asked me, like, so a hurricane is like a tornado on water? And it's like, yeah, right? I mean, right. Think about how devastating tornadoes are on land. So if the wind speed is not even as strong over the water, but what more problems are being exacerbated by this being not just a tornado, but with all of the flooding that is soon to follow? Betsy, do you have an answer for us? If not, please no worry. You knew it was called millibar. I had no idea anything. She writes here, 1 bar is just a little bit less than normal atmospheric pressure at sea level. Okay, so that's okay. So 1 bar is just a bit less than normal atmospheric pressure at sea level. So this is 902 millibars. So Betsy, can you please confirm this is 900 times more pressurized than the normal sea level pressure? Is that correct? Or how would you kind of do the exchange rate, so to speak?
Yeah, I thought I heard the term, the barometer's falling to indicate bad weather.
Right. Yeah, no, I have no idea.
Yeah.
This is why I got an F in meteorology.
All right.
Yeah. The hurricane subsequently weakened to another eye wall replacement cycle, and Katrina made its second landfall on August 29th. We're now in a 12-day window from when it begins out of the remnants of this tropical storm on the 17th, 29th. Now is a high-end Category 3 hurricane with sustained winds of 125 miles an hour, and now into the state of Louisiana. At landfall, hurricane force winds extended outward 120 miles from the center, and the storm's central pressure was even higher, 920 millibars. It's fallen in intensity with wind speed from 175 to 120 miles per hour, but the central pressure has become more intense. After moving over southeastern Louisiana and Breton Sound, it made its third and final landfall under the Louisiana-Mississippi border with 120 mile per hour sustained winds. Still at mid-range Category 3 hurricane intensity, Katrina maintained strength well into Mississippi, finally losing strength more than 150 miles inland in Meridian, Mississippi. It was downgraded to a tropical depression near Clarksville, Tennessee, its remnants absorbed by a cold front in the eastern Great Lakes region on August 31st. The resulting extratropical storm moved rapidly to the north and affected even as far away as eastern Canada, into some of those provinces like, of course, Quebec and Newfoundland. So Betsy says here, see again, this shows how completely ignorant I am. I'm actually very grateful for this moment because I'm not being sarcastic now. I love that in the entire stretch of maple syrup history, I can always tell you the truth, period. This is correct, and I'm putting my name to it. And I'm not going to lie to you. When I don't know something, I'll tell you. I have no idea with meteorology and millibars. Betsy, so I'm so glad that this cleared up. I'm confessing to all the world my complete idiocy on meteorological barometric pressure. Betsy says 920 millibars is low. 1 bar is just a bit less than normal atmospheric pressure at sea level. So you're right about the barometer dropping, Barb. 920 millibars is low. It'd be lower than normal. The pressure would be lower than normal. My phone keeps wanting to correct millibars to milkshakes. That's how my brain feels right now. That's how my brain feels talking about millibars and car stuff, So Betsy, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. And I apologize still to all I know weathermen love this show. Weathermen are huge fans of maple syrup history. So they might all be they might be done with me after this. I really apologize to all the weathermen. But you guys, to the weather people, guess what? You're always in the bloopers. They're the ones who are always screwing up on the show. So you're allowed to screw up, but I'm not allowed to not know what millibars are. I don't think so. So Betsy says that it's actually low. 920 millibars is low because 1 bar, right, equals 1,000 millibars. Obviously, melee, right? Okay. All right. Quick recap. It starts on August 19th and makes its way into Louisiana on the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, pushing its way out, as you said already, September, by the end of August 31st, the remnants of the storm, the heavy rainfall still pushing out as far north. It's made that whole trace down from the Gulf of Mexico into Louisiana, across Mississippi, all up the states and into the eastern Canadian provinces. President George W. Bush declared a state of emergency in selected regions of Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi on August 27th. On the 28th, he spoke with Governor Blanco to encourage her to order a mandatory evacuation of New Orleans. However, during the testimony by former FEMA Chief Michael Brown, but the FEMA, of course, is the Federal Emergency Management Agency. During the testimony by former FEMA Chief Michael Brown before a U.S. House subcommittee on September 26th, about a month after all this is going on, Representative Stephen Beyer, a Republican from Indiana, inquired as to why Bush's declaration of state of emergency on August 27th had not included the coastal parishes of Orleans, Jefferson, and Plaquemine. The declaration actually did not include any of Louisiana's coastal parishes, whereas the coastal counties were included in the declarations for both Mississippi and Alabama. Brown testified this is because Louisiana Governor Blanco had not included those parishes in her initial request for aid, a decision that he found, quote, shocking. After the hearing, Blanco released a copy of her letter which showed she had requested assistance for all the southeastern parishes, including the city of New Orleans, and these supposedly left out places are named. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, you may or may not remember this, it immediately becomes pinned in the media as kind of a debacle handling of the crisis situation, so to speak. Okay, so what are the most important points here? Number one, a once in 100-year storm. That's number one point to realize. A once in 100-year storm, right? 175-mile-per-hour winds, Category 5 hurricane, dumping incredible amounts of rain. That's point number one. Where? Number two, in a city that is basically below sea level, at sea level. Has anyone been to New Orleans before? Been to Jackson Square? If you've been down to Jackson Square, I've been in New Orleans actually multiple times because I lived in Mississippi for a while. I've been in New Orleans probably 5 or 6 times. And with Jackson Square, I'm not sure if you're seeing the Mississippi River at sea level or you're actually below sea level, but it's right there. New Orleans is a sea level / sub-sea level city. All right. So number one is a once in 100-year storm. Number two is that the place where the rainfall is going to be coming cannot take any rain. It's a place that's already at the kind of the absolute level of, a tipping point level, even a little bit of rain. Exactly. In a bowl, it's gonna have, Lake Pontchartrain is there. You have you have Gulf of Mexico, the Mississippi River, and you're very low. That's already very problematic. So once in 100 years, the topography layout. And number three, the question that I couldn't answer that I'm interested too, was upkeep just avoided on the levee system? What does decades ago mean? Decades ago could mean the 1980s, could be the 1940s. How long were these levees that eventually fail out of commission, so to speak, in a non-usable state, for which, as we said, right, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is not held liable, but more because of a kind of loophole in the law of liability and kind of jurisprudential lawsuit minutia, more so than actually like, hey, they should have perhaps done a better job on the initial build or did the kind of necessary maintenance repairs. Those are the first three important points. Once in 100-year storm, low-lying engineer failure. On top of that is like, does President Bush react fast enough? And the federal government, FEMA. What about the governor? What about the mayor? What about the local officials? Getting people out, response, etc. It becomes a massive kind of like debacle at the Superdome. I don't know if you all remember that, but the Superdome, of course, where the New Orleans Saints play football, it becomes a refuge center, and all these horror stories start coming out. Probably a lot of them are made up, fabricated, but some stuff maybe not. And apparently, God have mercy, God rest their souls. Like multiple people commit suicide at the Superdome, like jumping off the top, and like it becomes just a disaster. The city falls into, for a couple of weeks at least, a post-apocalyptic nightmare scenario. And it starts right away with like, who's being evacuated, who's not, who's being overlooked, who's being helped, who's not. Voluntary and mandatory evacuations were issued for large areas of southeast Louisiana, as well as coastal Mississippi and Alabama. About 1.2 million residents of the Gulf Coast were covered under voluntary or mandatory evacuation order. At a news conference at 10 a.m. on August 28th, shortly after Katrina was upgraded to a Category 5 storm, remember, 175-mile-per-hour winds, the mayor orders the first ever mandatory evacuation of the city, calling Katrina, quote, a storm that most of us have long feared. The city government also established several refuges of last resort for citizens who could not evacuate, could not leave the city for one reason or another, including, right, the number one focal point of this. When I post this episode online, I'm gonna have a bunch of slides and stuff. I've already made them, so I can tell you like by fact, not like why I hope so. They're already done, especially of the Superdome. I-10, I believe it is, the interstate that goes through New Orleans, just completely submerged by water, all the kind of famous, infamous photos. The Louisiana Superdome will shelter temporarily, at least supposed to be the idea, over 20,000 people. Some estimates claim that of the 1.3 million residents of the greater New Orleans metropolitan area, 80% evacuate. 80% evacuate. Out of 1.3 million people that are in the kind of the most dangerous areas, the real epicenter, the hardest hit areas. It goes without saying, I would assume, I think all of you would agree, that Hurricane Katrina brings heavy rain to the entire state, the entire region, the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, Alabama, all that area. At some point, at some areas in Louisiana, rain falls as heavy as 8 to 10 inches. From what I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, 1 inch of rain is equivalent to like 3 feet of snow, I think, precipitation wise. I think I heard something like that. So let's just play an interesting game. 8 to 10 inches times 3 feet. That's 24 feet, 30 feet of snow. But that's the amount of like just precipitation, like the punch precipitation is packing. In the area around Slidell, it records the highest rainfall in the state, approximately 15 inches. So imagine if someone told you, hey, in Wallace, Idaho, there's 45 feet of snow that fell this weekend. I mean, imagine like, 3 feet of snow is a massive storm, these nor'easters. I remember the 1993 nor'easter storm in Pennsylvania was I was a little boy, and we got like 30 inches of snow. It was a lot, 2.5 feet. Imagine if someone told you in Wallace, Idaho, 40 feet of snow fell this weekend. The entire city's buried in snow, right? I mean, that's the kind of rainfall. That's the kind of just the power of Katrina, just in the rainfall. Forget the winds, the damaging, the damaging winds, the tornado on the water, the power lines falling down, all the kind of other problems. We're just talking about rain. As a result of the rainfall and storm surge, as a result of the rainfall and storm surge, the level of Lake Pontchartrain rose and caused significant flooding along its northeastern shore, which affects communities from the aforementioned Slidell, where 15 inches fall, down to Mandeville. A lot of different bridges are destroyed, including the I-10 twin span bridge connecting Slidell to New Orleans. Almost 1 million people lose power in the wake of this storm. The closer estimates are 900,000, but I mean, sorry, it's called a million. If it's 600,000, I can't call it a million. I'm going to call it a million. It's 900,000. We recently on the Palouse went through the whole Avista thing. It's not fun not to have power. God bless these people. They're in an apocalyptic horror zone of water up to their, necks, whatever, worried about fallen power lines and all kinds of stuff like that on top of this. Katrina's storm surge inundated all parishes, including, as I said before, Lake Pontchartrain, the parishes that surround Lake Pontchartrain, St. Tammany, Tangipahoa, St. John the Baptist, and St. Charles parishes. St. Tammany Parish received a two-part storm surge. The first came as Lake Pontchartrain rose and the storm blew water from the Gulf of Mexico into the lake. The second came as the eye of Katrina passed, westerly winds pushing the water into a bottleneck at the Rigolette's Pass, forcing it further inland. St. Bernard Parish was especially hard hit, flooded because of the breaching of levees that contain a navigation channel called the Mississippi River Gulf Outlet, and the breach of the 40 Arpent Canal levee that was designed and built by the Orleans Levee Board. The search for the missing was undertaken by the St. Bernard Fire Department because of the assets of the United States Coast Guard being diverted to New Orleans. So in these local surrounding parishes around Lake Pontchartrain, more inland Louisiana already, Lake Pontchartrain, I mean, it's right there in New Orleans. It's like neighboring, bordering, etc. But even like moving further away from the epicenter of the city, FEMA and the U.S. government and all this, they already have enough problem with New Orleans itself. The rescue operations in other places, perhaps just as hard hit, are being left to local, fire departments, kind of stuff. I mean, and God bless our first responders. These are amazing, brave men and women, honestly, without cliches, whatever, do put it on the line for their communities. You probably want more resources at that time, but they're all being spent and not being spent well at sometimes. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in St. Bernard Parish, 81% of the housing units were damaged. Tammany Parish, 70%. Plaquemines Parish, 80%. What else to read to you before? Because I don't want to go over, well-trodden ground. I don't want to be repetitive of what I've already read to you. When the mayor talks about, he orders this evacuation on August 28th. Okay, and then of course, like every hurricane, everyone knows this story very well. There's gonna be people who are like, no, I am going to ride out the storm. I've done it before, I've seen this before. There's a lot of, much ado about nothing. Well, by the evening of August 28th, still, despite 80% of the 1.3 million people having evacuated, about 100,000 people remained in the city, which, as I said earlier, over 20,000 taking refuge at the Louisiana Superdome, along with 300 National Guard troops. This should not be a huge problem because the Louisiana Superdome, NFL stadiums hold anywhere from 40 to 75,000 people. Actually, kind of FYI for sports fans, college stadiums have a larger attendance. I don't know if anyone knows that. At the largest football sports arenas, Michigan, Big House, Beaver Stadium, Penn State, Alabama, Crimson Tide, they're all over 100,000 people. NFL stadiums still hold 50, 60, 70, 80, 40. Like they should be able to hold 20,000 people. The point is, that's often in the orderly fashion of a football game. I'm here to watch football. This is like I'm trying to escape an apocalyptic situation, who knows what. The Superdome had been used as a shelter in the past, specifically because of the engineering capabilities that enabled it to withstand winds up to 200 miles per hour and water levels even as high as 35 feet. So people think, you know what, even if it goes full, and I'm not trying to be funny here, there's nothing funny here. God bless these people. I'm not trying to make a joke. Like if it goes full Noah's Ark, sincerely, if the entire city goes underwater, like in a crazy way, an unprecedented way, where there's 20 feet of water and everything submerged, the Superdome still should be able to withstand up to 35 feet. That's why it's being picked. While suppliers of MREs, which is an acronym for meals ready to eat, and bottles of water were to be available at the Superdome, they're supposed to be, hey, there's going to be some like, I don't know, I'm serious, pizza Lunchables, like I don't know what, anything, what, just food. Chef Boyardee, like whatever. What you give us an example of MREs? What are meals that are ready to eat? What are you looking at?
I didn't eat very many of those, but they just come in a little thing. It's got some, I don't even remember if we're talking about well over 50.
Some spam, some like crackers, whatever, maybe. I mean, just
Stuff that's set up so that it doesn't
Freeze-dried coffee.
I mean, it's probably something that literally in that situation, it's just supposed to keep you alive.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not for cuisine. It's not gourmet eating by obviously. It's not even fast food quality. It's just like so people don't die. People who need to get just X amount of sodium and electrolytes and just calories in their system, right? Despite that, the mayor tells the survivors to bring blankets and enough food for several days, warning, quote, it would not be a comfortable place. Okay. So the flooding comes, some people do not make it to the Superdome, but they're kind of just in the city, right? And this extensive flooding that starts battering, deluging, overwhelming the city beginning on August 28th into the 29th, leaves many stranded survivors just on top of their houses, right? Just, there's like a dotting, kind of a radar Doppler map of people just like sitting on top of their house, maybe with their dog, SOS scrawled in chalk or something. Some were trapped inside attics, unable to escape. Many people chopped their way under roofs, hatchets, and sledgehammers, which the mayor had urged residents to store in their attics in case of such events. Clean water was unavailable. And power outages, as I said earlier, right? Almost 1 million people, over 900,000 people who were affected by power outages would last for weeks. With reports of bodies floating on the water throughout the city, primarily in the eastern portion. Some hotels and hospitals reported diesel fuel shortages. And then on that very day, on Monday, August 29th, 2005, on Monday, August 29th, 2005, there were over 50 reported failures of the levees and flood walls protecting New Orleans, Louisiana, and its suburbs. The failures caused flooding in over 80% of New Orleans and all St. Bernard Parish. In New Orleans alone, 134,000 housing units, 70% of all occupied units in the city, suffered damage and effects of flooding. Residents who had evacuated the Superdome, who had been told before, right, by the mayor, hey, we have these MREs, which Betsy Johnson says, MREs are supposed to provide a full meal with variety, should provide a full day of meals for a soldier. But that says it all, and that's good to know, thank God, if people can get the necessary nutrients. But exactly, for a soldier, these are rations. This is like, you say freeze-dried coffee, this is, on the go, nothing about this is ideal. It's not even respectable to call it suboptimal. And Betsy's really trying to put a bow on this, saying they include dessert and treats. I don't know, Betsy, I don't know. MRE desserts, I honestly would have to see the quality of these desserts. And I say that with like, once more, I'm serious. Like next semester, we're gonna talk about it in on Wednesday, because
Hershey bar,
sorry,
Hershey bar.
a Hershey bar.
Yeah,
Hershey bars were really big in World War II.
that's what I'm saying.
There you go. We're going to talk about the upcoming class for the spring on Wednesday. It's going to be on Catholicism and beauty. I can't wait. Every lecture is going to be a different lecture about something beautiful, because the good, the true, and the beautiful are the three transcendentals, ultimately relating to God, who is ultimate goodness, truth, and beauty. That class can be a lot lighter than this class. It's been very, very heavy. It's a lot of heavy stuff. I just got done doing by the way, I don't know if any of you saw, but I posted the channel, the 9/11 lecture ended up being almost 5 hours long. It was 3 classes in here, plus an addendum of Catholic reactions. 9/11, what more do you have to say? Chernobyl, the Hindenburg, the Titanic, now Hurricane Katrina. It's all, very somber stuff. So there's nothing funny here. I can't wait to be super goofy next semester when it's not somber. But I'll allow myself some goofiness here. No, Betsy. Betsy writes gum and toilet paper. Are those the desserts, or they just included with the MREs? I mean, Betsy, I got it. Whoever made MREs should give you a cut of like the promotional something. You're doing a great job selling this. I'm serious. Like, I thought, I looked at this MRE stuff and I was like, this is awful. And my heart breaks all the more for these poor men and women who suffered through this event. And Betsy's making MRE sound like they're actually not that bad. Once more, thank you for providing this information very much. They provide a full day of meals for a soldier, desserts and treats, gum and toilet paper, etc. Okay, so it's something that's supposed to just get you through the day, and perhaps it's not as bad as I'm making it out to be. And you know what? If it's me versus Betsy Johnson, I give the win to Betsy Johnson. And here's where Betsy has cemented her win with the last post. She writes, desserts are cookies or pound cake. Betsy, you win. I surrender. Maybe MREs are not that bad. I don't know. But so, okay, FEMA had promised more than 1/3 of these rations. FEMA had promised 360,000 military rations. However, only 40,000 had arrived. Okay, so maybe some of you who are like, yeah, typical government, they deliver 1/9 of what they promised to be there. There was no water purification on site at the Superdome, our main refuge center, nor any chemical toilets, antibiotics, or anti-diarrheals stored for a crisis. There were no designated medical staff at work in the evacuation center, no established sick bay within the Superdome. Think about like a makeshift triage hospital wing, whatever, right? And very few cots available that hadn't been brought in by evacuees. So the cots that are there are people that brought their own cot, like bring your own bed. The mayor had stated that it was, quote, a refuge of last resorts. Right. By August 30th, with no air conditioning, temperature inside the dome reaches 90 degrees, into the 90s. That's very, very hot. I don't know how well all of you know home temperature. I recently started understanding it more because I wanted to have the temperature to like 65 to sleep. When if it's 70, it's too warm to sleep. I want it to be nice and cold in the house. 90 is very, very warm. 90 is insane. 90 is awful. Yeah. 90 degrees, terrible humidity. You're talking about like, heat index close to 100%. It's Louisiana. It's terribly sticky, hot, humid. It's in the summer. It's not the fall. It's still August. Right. I mean, it's awful. Temperatures inside the dome reached the 90s, and the punctured dome at once allowed humidity in and trapped it in there, as you said. To say, quote, tempers began to flare as the hunger and thirst deepened. I mean, what more? Duh, right? We're all human beings. I just got angry today because someone like honked at me in traffic. And I'm wearing an awesome blue suit and I have a cup of coffee. I have nothing to be mad about. Okay? Food rotted inside the hundreds of unpowered refrigerators and freezers spread throughout the building. This is awful and just terribly sad. The quote, blood and feces cover the wall of the facility. It's like one of these things where it's like, on the one hand, it's like, okay, we're all human. Please like relieve yourself with some dignity, let's say, right? Whatever. At the same time, these are the conditions going on. Like people are living in this literal hellhole where it's like you said, it's hot, it's humid. Maybe you've lost your family. You don't know what's going on. Where is the government? What's like, is it going to be more? Is the storm still ongoing? Everyone's angry. There's no water. Like this is, this is why this semester has been so heavy. Like I'm not going to judge these people and be like, oh, I'd be better. I'd be the worst. I'd be the worst person in this scenario. According to many, the smell inside the stadium was revolting due to the breakdown of the plumbing system, which included all toilets and urinals in the building, forcing people to urinate and defecate in garbage cans and sinks. That is, I don't like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't, like, I'm sorry for laughing. Like, there comes a point where someone's like, you know what? There's a sink. Like, no, right?
There's a corner there. It's been set.
There's got to be like, okay, I don't know how this works because it's like a Lord of the Flies situation, right? But like, there's got to be someone who steps up and is like, we're all human beings. You know, first of all, how about we all pray? How about we all pray, try to calm down, you know, Lord help us. Okay, what's the next practical thing we can do? Stuff. And then finally, okay, people have to go to the bathroom. When you have people have to defecate, urinate, there's going to be a place designated. Who's gonna be like, I'll just do it right here in front of everyone? Like that's unacceptable, right? There's got to be some level of human dignity left. You're like, I'm not going to do this in front of someone like out in the open, like, or someone could organize something where it's like you're still. There is the thing, even in times of crises, of like maintaining the idea that we're made in the image and likeness of God. No, I'm not going to defecate into a sink. Like that's disgusting. Right? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to maintain some level of decorum, no matter how awful this gets. But I mean, no, right? And some people chose to wear medical masks to ease the smell. Yeah, some people did. I mean, like if you had a, yeah. I'm sorry for laughing. Like I did not mean to laugh during this lecture, but like, oh man. Okay, back to being serious. Tragically, in the midst of all this awful stuff, when the serious flooding of the city begins on August 30th, after the levees are broken, the Superdome itself begins to slowly fill with water. Though it remains confined only to the field level, the place where the New Orleans Saints play. By the way, I'm gonna do a shout out. You guys know I'm a terrible sports fan. I love sports. The New Orleans Saints are awesome for the city and helping them recover. One of the earliest games, there's a Monday night football game in 2006, where a Coug alum named Steve Gleason has a blocked punt, and the New Orleans Saints beat the Atlanta Falcons, I believe, and it's a huge comeback. It's like a year prior, we were in this dome with all this awful stuff. Here's the Saints back on the field, and maybe all you know more famously, 4 years later, the Saints win the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that year in the '06 season, they made it all the way to the NFC Championship.
Oh, great. Awesome.
It's just like, if you have like a 1 or 2 win season the year prior.
That's awesome. Amen. Yeah, and how good does that make you feel if you love the Saints? The Saints really are a team that is like of New Orleans. I mean, they're part of that Bayou culture, whatever, just like the Dallas Cowboys are for Texas, or you know, the New York Yankees in baseball. So that's beautiful, right? In this place that was this, you know, awful place of suffering, to have such triumph come immediately to the next year is just a very kind of beautiful thing. Later that day, August 30th, and some people say finally, Governor Kathleen Blanco orders New Orleans to be completely evacuated. But probably at this point, it's a little bit like the horses out of the, you know, closing the barn doors and the horse is gone. Because by this time, the population of Dome had nearly doubled within 2 days to approximately 30,000 as helicopters and vehicles capable of cutting through deep floodwaters picked up stranded citizens. On August 31st, it was announced that the Superdome evacuees would be moved to the Astrodome in Houston. With no power or clean water supply, sanitary conditions within the Superdome had rapidly deteriorated. Evacuees began to break into luxury suites, concession stands, vending machines, and offices to look for food and other supplies. There is nothing wrong with that, right? There is really just a kind of point on Catholic moral theology. Thou shalt not steal, the seventh commandment. No, if you're in the Superdome and you're in this situation, absolutely open the vending machine to drink the Dr. Pepper, which will not give you dysentery or whatever. You know, like there's no clean water, 100%. The luxury suites. I'm not trying to be. There's nothing funny here. I'm even sorry for laughing before. I can't help it. The idea of like, so again, we won't revisit what we talked about earlier, but yeah. I'm not trying to be funny here, like, break the luxury suites respectively. I'm serious. You don't have to riot and destroy it, but absolutely break in and get in a luxury suite that can be water or whatever, of course. And this is human survival here. This is not like, oh, how dare you? No. I mean, yeah. So that's not even, I think it's even inappropriately stated in the notes, the report that I have, evacuees breaking in. No, it's like they're just trying to survive, right? Anything they can here. At midnight that same day, a private helicopter arrived to evacuate some members of the National Guard and their families. They were taken to the Lamar Dixon Expo Center in Baton Rouge. On September 2nd, so Dom, you were exactly right. This kind of crisis, remember, beginning on August 19th, Lesser Antilles really moves forward. On September 2nd, 475 buses were sent by FEMA to pick up evacuees from the Dome and the Ernest M. Memorial Convention Center, where also more than 20,000 people have been crowded in similar conditions. Praise God, when these evacuees were taken to the Astrodome in Houston, or more than 20,000 others taken to different locations in other parts of Texas, like San Antonio and Dallas, they're given three meals, snacks, hygiene supplies, locker rooms to shower. I mean, this is beautiful. And this is true. God bless his people. Their refugees were given. They're absolutely. If I met one of these people that survived the Superdome, God bless you. My brother, my sister, you are a refugee. You are as much a refugee as someone fleeing a war-torn country. To be a refugee is not just, I escaped bomb-ridden Syria. I mean, like, if your entire city was hit by a bomb of a natural disaster as Katrina was, and you had to live through the horror and the awfulness of the Superdome and those conditions, the kind of truly apocalyptic, ambiance, that whole deal. That is absolutely the appropriate term. On September 7th, speculation starts building that perhaps the Superdome is going to have to be demolished. That the water that had gotten into the field level, and it's going to be irreparable. But no, the state of Louisiana and the operator of the dome chose to repair it, and it will open again in 2006. And as Dom says, the best of Saints football is right around the corner, which, that's so stupid, whatever. Like, no, that was very healing for that city to see in that location of such great suffering in the Superdome, to see people, to see the Saints do well, and eventually 4 years later win the Super Bowl, as a kind of, perhaps saying resurrection of New Orleans is too strong of a word, but whatever you want to call it. But indeed, right, that's the crux of our Catholic faith, the death and resurrection of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and how we see the death and resurrection, that paradigm played out around us always. Talked about that with Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens dies and resurrects. So too the city of New Orleans. Final economic things, we're talking about Catholic reactions. Yeah, right. The labor force diminishes, wages decrease by staggering amounts. The loss of jobs is estimated to be over 70,000. Sectors most affected were service-related industries. The only sector to truly thrive after landfall was what? What's the one sector that thrives after the hurricane hits? Yeah, no, exactly. My Uncle Joel, shout out to Uncle Joel. It's actually my uncle-in-law. It's my aunt's uncle. Is that a thing? Uncle-in-law? He's an uncle. Him and his wife, Sherry, live on Magazine Street in New Orleans. They're going to watch the episode and be like, why are you giving out our address? I'm not giving out your address. It's not, no one can go down and be like, hey, where's Joel? But actually, he's a legend on Magazine Street, so people probably know him. But we actually visited them. My wife, Kate, and I visited Joel and Sherry on Magazine Street in New Orleans many times. And they are like, they've gone full New Orleans. I say as a complete compliment, like they're Idaho people, they've gone full New Orleans. The first day we went there, we went to this Mardi Gras thing, not on Mardi Gras, in November. And Joel's at the front of the thing and playing a trumpet with some guy, and was like, he went full hog, New Orleans. Joel is one of these guys, an expert construction man, contractor, carpenter, who's like, I'm gonna go rebuild Katrina. Very Catholic reaction thing to do. I'm gonna go out of just love for neighbor, rebuild this city, and he ends up staying with a lot of people. Construction is the only business that kind of booms. Is estimated that if New Orleans was to restore 1,700 square miles of wetland lost before 2005, the natural capital will be worth an estimated $6 billion per year. While New Orleans has made numerous efforts in rebuilding their economy and has been successful with tourist attraction events such as Mardi Gras, they are still working now, almost 2 decades later, to return the city to its pre-Katrina buzz, productivity,
Mhm.
normalcy, whatever you want to call it. All right, let's look at some Catholic reactions. We have 23 minutes left. Let's look at some Catholic reactions. I have a couple for you. So, first one is from Father Matt Malone, 2006, September 25th. This is, a month after the event. Father Matt Malone, September 25th, 2006, America Magazine, Catholics in Katrina, talking about the role the church plays in the region's recovery. Quote, the first thing one notices upon entering the church, the Immaculate Conception in downtown New Orleans, is the smell of gasoline. Instead of being overwhelmed by the church's impressive Moorish architecture, one is overwhelmed by this olfactory reminder that a year ago this church stood near the eye of the third deadliest hurricane in American history. 12 months after the storm, New Orleans is still littered with mementos of Katrina. The leaking gas tank deep beneath Immaculate Conception is largely the extent of this parish's storm damage, but elsewhere in the city, especially in the lower lying neighborhoods where the floodwaters reach their apex, whole neighborhoods are still uninhabited and seemingly uninhabitable. In the lower Ninth Ward, the destruction is nearly total. In neighborhoods like Gentilly and New Orleans East, abandoned cars still sit where the storm surge left them. Schools and churches stand lifeless. Nearly every house is marked with a spray-painted signature of the National Guard unit that searched it for the living and the dead. Okay, so it continues on, Father Malone, in this first Catholic Reaction America magazine article, that the storm claimed over 1,000 lives in New Orleans alone, 80% of the city flooded, 120,000 more homes destroyed. And Father Malone really makes a good point in this article, saying that New Orleans suffered 2 major disasters in a 24-hour period. First, the winds of this hurricane, then the massive flood. So once more to my sons, Soren and Bjorn, who are like, so is a hurricane a tornado over water, right? It has all the devastating effects of a very strong tornado. Then you add in the flood that comes afterwards, like what we talked about in Catholic disasters with earthquakes. Talked about the great earthquake of Messina, Italy, 1908 in a previous episode. Or the Lisbon earthquake of 1755, All Saints' Day in Portugal, that you have the earthquake and then often the crumbling of buildings and fire often coming in the wake of. There's fires after the San Francisco earthquake in 1906. Well, with these tornadoes on water, hurricanes, it's often the winds and the water that comes as well. It will not be easy, Father Malone says, rebuilding the city, it's only, remember, written a month after it happened. In pre-Katrina New Orleans, the poverty rate was twice the national average. While the storm affected all classes of people, it disproportionately affected the poor. The contrast in rich and poor is starkest as the city begins its recovery. Families with resources to return and rebuild have done so. But for families of modest means, like the Estelles, the recovery has been much slower. Right, so that judgment of the nations, Matthew 25. I was hungry, gave me food, thirsty, gave me drink. And that song, whatsoever he did unto, the least of my people, he did unto me. Like, right, God bless these poor people in who we should see every single one of them Christ, who are being disproportionately affected by this event. And the diocese, the Archdiocese of New Orleans, feels the effects too. The current, as in then current, the then Archbishop of New Orleans, Alfred C. Hughes, assessed the damage to the Archdiocese at $225 million. It's not the 190 billion of the whole area, but a part of that 190 billion total bill is $225 million to the Archdiocese of New Orleans. Of the 1,276 buildings owned by the Archdiocese, almost 400 suffered severe flooding, 864 damage from the wind. The Archdiocese did have enough insurance to cover the wind damage, but like many property owners, not nearly enough to cover the flooding. Insurance will cover only about $25 million of the estimated $145 million in flood damage. But kind of a silver lining, and I could probably end the class with this. I won't. We have more reactions to read, but the Catholic Church's efforts, Father Malone's, he says they've been considerable. in a place when you cross the border from Mississippi into Louisiana, you say bienvenue en Louisiane, welcome to Louisiana in French. In a very French, Spanish, and so French and Spanish, super Catholic state like Louisiana, where counties are parishes and Catholicism is ever present. The Catholic Church is at the tip of the spear of the recovery efforts. Okay, the government is trying to do its best. Hopefully, FEMA, Catholic Church is really stepping up. Within the first 4 months of the recovery, Catholic Charities distributed nearly 40 million pounds of food. The Archdiocese set up 12 strategically located community centers that continue to distribute almost $200,000 a week in recovery aid. So every 5 weeks, $1 million of aid for however that lasts, coming from simply charity as in caritas, right? That divine love of God above all, that divinely driven love by the grace of God, to love God above all and your neighbor as yourself, for the sake of God. The church is at the front of the efforts. Second reaction. Thank you, Father Malone. Second reaction. The Network Lobby, networklobby.org, puts the focus on Katrina with climate change. What are your thoughts? I don't know. Climate change is a hoax. No, climate change is the absolute worst. It's an existential crisis. That's what people say, right? The extreme is, we have 5 days to act. We're all going to die. It's an existential crisis. The other, it's a hoax. Well, I try not to comment on these kind of things that, you make up your mind. I'm not going to influence you whatever way, but like the Network Lobby connects things to Laudato Si, Pope Francis, blaming human consumption, carbon, etc. Right? Here's what this article has to say 10 years after the disaster. The Pope is clear. The damage wrought by Hurricane Katrina and the dozens of other natural disasters, both in the US and abroad, are our problem because they are our doing. Quote, our sister, Mother Earth, now cries out to us because of the harm we have inflicted on her by our irresponsible use and abuse of the goods with which God has endowed her. Catholic social tradition teaches us to see our world as a gift and endows us with the responsibility to preserve God's creation. In the book of Genesis, God grants mankind dominion over the earth, but throughout the Bible, God calls people to serve as protectors of creation, forever conscious of their temporary power. So more, right, stewards of the earth, not exploiters. And then the Network Lobby concludes by saying you need personal and government stuff to reduce the carbon footprint. And that's awful because how dare these guys piggyback off this disaster to make their climate points, or no, they're exactly right. Climate change is an existential problem. It's the reason we have this more, I don't know. I'm not a climate scientist. I'm not going to comment further. Baltimore, the Archdiocese of Baltimore puts out a report also in 2015. 10 years after the disaster, where they say kind of like what we've been talking about too, what's the simple answer? How? The Baltimore report asks, how could a Category 5 storm that engulfed the entire Gulf of Mexico but dropped in intensity to a Category 3, burying one of the world's most iconic cities in a flood of biblical proportions, become the watershed moment in New Orleans' nearly 300-year history? The Archdiocese of Baltimore says, they're first of all putting that out there. Hurricane Katrina is the most important thing that's ever happened in New Orleans. That's what the Archdiocese of Baltimore is saying. Simple answer is poorly engineered and constructed federal levees gave way under pressure, dooming a topographically challenged city that sits mostly below sea level. That's what I said earlier, right? That you have those three factors. A flood of biblical proportions, number one, the topography at or below sea level, and then the engineering failures. And yet, 10 years later, New Orleans, in so many ways, new and improved, utterly resilient, is a resurrection city. Talk about Catholic language there. Quote, it is extraordinary when you look back now and see what has emerged and how life has been restored, said now retired New Archbishop Hughes, who admits he was stunned when he took a helicopter flight over the massive flooding 2 days after the storm and then walked the city's empty streets 2 weeks later. Quote, it was like a war zone. No sign of life. I mean, everything was gray. Vegetation. There were no insects, no birds, no human beings, no lights, no electricity. Seeing the city dead just took the inner breath out of me. It just seemed as though it was going to be impossible to recover from this. End quote. And yet where sin abounds, grace all the more, right? And despite the fact that there's a diaspora, an expulsion of about 500,000 Catholics out of this very Catholic city, I don't know if you all know this. New Orleans has two things that are true. New Orleans is a beautiful Catholic city of vibrant Catholic faith, beautiful churches, and it's Las Vegas, right? Incredible, open, sinful, crazy behavior. Oh, that's just in the French Quarter. No, it's everywhere. No, it's not just in French. Every place is the French Quarter in New Orleans, right? So New Orleans, I mean, there you go. Like the tares and the wheat, the good and the bad. New Orleans is a very holy, amazing place, where you can like really get your Catholic on in the most beautiful way. I'm going to go to Eucharistic adoration 5 times a day, 5 different churches on 5 corners, all of them built in the 1800s. Smell that history. Go to Eucharistic adoration at this Perpetual Adoration Church over there. Go to confession here, or I'm going to go do Mardi Gras stuff down in the French Quarter. And God forbid, right? I mean, so New Orleans is like it's Catholic Las Vegas, and I say that as kind of it's not. It's like both. It's very Catholic and Las Vegas at the same time. So a lot of the people that are leaving the city, 500 million, it's 500 million, excuse me, 500,000, 500,000 are Catholics. Archbishop Hughes, quote, "I can remember going the first morning to the Adoration Chapel and just pouring out to the Lord my anguish and confusion and uncertainty about what to say and what to do." Because across the region, right, hundreds of thousands of homes, everyone destroyed, damaged, whatever. Once more, awesome Catholic reaction, though. Cool Catholic silver lining. In the midst of the devastation, the Catholic Church jump-started the city's initial recovery with a bold plan. Open up as many Catholic schools as quickly as possible to provide families with a reason to return. Even, you go to public school, just come to the Catholic school until you can go back. We're going to help you guys. We, the Catholic Church, are going to give aid. We're going to give money. We're going to open our schools. We're going to try to just be Catholic, be maximally Catholic, because, in response to the question of where was God in the midst of Katrina, as Archbishop Gregory M. Amen says, he then answers his own question, quote, "He was walking in the floodwaters, carrying people. He was in the attic where people were dying. He was in the Superdome where there was a lot of chaos, but he did not abandon us." And Hughes, Archbishop Hughes, the Archbishop Emeritus, retired, but who was Archbishop during Katrina, says, quote, "When you look back now and see what has emerged and how life has been restored, it is extraordinary," end quote. I can attest to that. I went to New Orleans the first time in my life in 2010, when we just moved to Mississippi. Like I said, we lived in Mississippi until 2015, and went down to see Uncle Joel and Aunt Sherry on Magazine Street, November 2010. I could not see one trace of Katrina. There was nothing like, this is 5 years later. You hope 5 years later, God willing, and indeed it could be cleaned up. This is not a month later, this is 5 years later. But the city looked extremely vibrant, beautiful, all the kind of boulangeries, little boutiques, everything brimming with life. Super, yeah. September 4th, 2005, Catholic reaction number 4, Pope Benedict. He says, quote, "I want to ensure my prayer for the dead and their relatives, for the wounded without a roof, for the sick, the children, the elderly, and I bless those who are busy with the difficult rescue and rebuilding operation," end quote. Anytime the Pope comments on something, it's a big deal. Remember, the Pope did not comment on the Hindenburg disaster. I was surprised. Betsy Johnson, she always does. She always has great input to the class. And I mean that again, just period, 100%. That's just true. Betsy Johnson said, well, I mean, yeah, like the Hindenburg was a big deal for Americans, Germans, and people. But was it a worldwide thing? This is a worldwide thing. That even the Pope, who at that time is at Castel Gandolfo in the hills south of Rome. Think kind of like, this baby is not a perfect example, kind of like a papal Camp David. He's away from the Vatican, kind of on vacation. Still makes comment on this because it truly is a world event. If you want more information too, go look up at the hyperlink is literally usccb.org. It's the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. usccb.org, issues in action, human life and dignity, federal budget. Talking about just the official bishop statement on Katrina. The last thing that I want to read to you from, my friends, is this thing from 2021. From the National Catholic Reporter, Hurricane Katrina brought out the best in us. It's from Father Peter Daly. And I'm going to end the class. This is my last, number 6, I think, Catholic reaction. Done actually a lot of reactions today, which is cool. unsurprisingly, it's such a Catholic city, right? But I want to really kind of finish this beautiful reaction from this priest, Father Peter Daly. Hurricane Katrina brought out the best in us, National Catholic Reporter Online 2021. Everything I read henceforth to the recording stopped, end of class button is from Father Peter Daly in this article. Disasters like Ida and Katrina also have a positive effect. They bring out the best in us. I always say that people are better in hurricanes. In disasters, we remember our neighbors. We also establish new bonds with people who are geographically far away, but suddenly very much on our minds. Like everyone in the wake of Katrina, we were moved with the desire to do something. Ellipsis, moving forward, he says, find like the idea of like putting out gift cards and stuff. We decided the quickest and easiest way to get stuff was to send Walmart gift cards so people could buy what they needed. Eventually, we sent something like $20,000 worth of gift cards to various parishes. We bought so many gift cards, we had to call corporate headquarters in Arkansas at Walmart to get them shipped because our local store had run out. We got in touch with other parishes, including the people of our Mother of Mercy parish in Pass Christian, Mississippi. We decided to build a relationship with them. Over the course of a year, we would make nearly a dozen mission trips to Mississippi to aid the small, largely Black Josephite parish on the Gulf Coast. It was one of the highlights of my life. Everyone involved had the same reaction. On one of my early trips to Mississippi, I became aware of how the Holy Spirit worked through that mission to teach us. Like everyone in Pass Christian, I was eating in the giant tent set up by the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency to feed the townspeople and the personnel. People gathered there. It was the only place to eat in that area. Power was out of the whole town. There was no clean water except in that tent. I remember sitting at lunch with the pastor, the 84-year-old Josephite Father Bartholomew Enslow, who has since died. We were discussing what to do about the old convent building that had been underwater because of the 35-foot storm surge. 35-foot storm surge. A man at the next table, a contractor from Arkansas, heard me. He came over so he could tear down the building and haul it away. He asked $2,500 for the job. I wrote him a check on the spot. On the next trip to Mississippi, someone asked, quote, "Did you get a permit to tear that building down?" "No," I said. There was no city hall. By that time, a newly reopened city hall was functioning out of a FEMA trailer. The lady at city hall went to Enslow's parish. She said, "Oh, that's all right. We'll fix you right up." She issued a demolition permit for the old convent and stamped it approved. There, she said, all legal. That is the way to handle red tape after a hurricane.
Yeah.
And then he kind of finishes this article. Very beautiful reflection. I don't want to just read all of it. This is the last part that I'll read for you once more. Father Peter Daly, 2021 NCR Online. Hurricane Katrina brought out the best of us. One more quote from him here. "We returned many times to Mississippi and Louisiana over the next 2 years. The people there became our friends. On an early trip to Mississippi, I was eating in that same tent. It was filled with people, all talking and laughing. There were people of every description, Black and white, Latino and Anglo, young and old, rich and poor. There were church groups from many denominations, Catholic, Lutheran, Mormon, and evangelical. There even was a large group of prisoners on work release sent to help in the hurricane relief. As I stood to leave, I looked about and it struck me. This is it, I thought. This is the banquet of heaven. Everyone is here. This is what it will be like."